in Baltimore and WNST.net. We've got the Orioles in town for a few more days before they head out of the country this weekend. Of course, taking on the world champions. We got the Stanley Cup Finals, the NBA Finals, and of course the Ravens back out on the field for OTAs this week ahead of mandatories next week. John Harbaugh and the Ravens after their slap on the wrist. But the big story in sports this week, there's no doubt about it, the big story in news this week, if you put on any television channel, the life, the times of the most famous man in the world who left us on Friday night into Saturday morning, Muhammad Ali, the former Cassius Clay, and I'm giving everybody in my world a chance to tell their Ali stories if they have some. I've been sharing my story of how I met Ali in Atlanta in 1999 and 2000, how I saw him at the Senator Theater for a Glory premiere with Tom Kefauver up there back in 1990, and I got a lot of people that came in contact with Ali or Cosell or people around that era, and one of them lives right here in Baltimore. He is a multi-time Emmy Award-winning producer. He is our friend and the word man, DC, out on Twitter. We welcome one of our defending champions back from the land of Cross Keys. We welcome Jim Williams back onto the program. Jimmy, how goes it? And obviously, this is real near and dear to your heart.
Absolutely. I grew up across the street. I grew up in Tampa. And I grew up across the street from Lou Vescucci. Lou was a boxing promoter and also a manager. He, along with Chris and Angelo Dundee, promoted a number of Muhammad's fights, especially the most memorable one, I suppose, for them was the Liston fight.
Well, the reason we even know Angelo Dundee's name, right, is because of Ali, right?
Sure.
He's the most famous trainer ever because he trained the most famous fighter ever, right?
And Ferdy Pacheco was also part of the group.
The fight doctor.
And so as a kid, and with the fact that Mr. Vescucci lived across the street, I actually saw Ali train 3 or 4 times down in Miami at the Fifth Street Gym, and it was
as amazing. A kid. How old were you? I mean, give me.
Oh God, I was in my I was 12, 14, something like that.
Wow, so you really were a kid. Okay.
So I mean, it was you didn't know in essence what you were watching. Okay, you were watching the greatest fighter at the time, but you didn't know what you were involved with, basically. And so I got to see him in that area. And of course, because of living across the street from Mr. Vescucci, from 1971 till his final fight in 81, I watched via closed circuit all of his fights, and had the opportunity later to work with Frazier and Holmes and George Foreman and Ferdy Pacheco and get a ton of Ali stories. But, as I said, as a kid, it was amazing. Angelo, and the way it worked was, I mean, he loved to train, and you could watch him on the speed bag, you could watch him on the heavy bag, but he also enjoyed the fact that people wanted to watch him train, and he would joke, and he would have fun, and he would pull people from the audience to box with him, and it was he put on a 3-hour show,
and it was free at his training.
You just walked in, and if you wanted to, you could just sit there and watch, and we did, and as I said, Dundee and Pacheco and the gang were always around the neighborhood, and I actually came home from school one day looking over and seeing Joe Frazier in an orange tree picking oranges with Yank Durham holding the ladder to keep him from falling out of the tree. So, it was one of those situations where you were around greatness, but you didn't really realize it until well after it had happened.
Jim Williams, the media examiner, and the word man, DC, joining us here and talking all things Ali. I say media to you, and, it's been what I've done. It's the way I've made my living. It's the way you've made your living. Mm-hmm. There's almost a point where Muhammad Ali invented sports media, right? There was the interview with Mickey Mantle over a beer at the locker that was always very genteel. It was always slap on the back. We're going to get on the train together. We're going to go to the next city together. There was a lot of that in the jackocracy, as Cosell would say. But, during the 60s, all of that changed because Ali wasn't just about the show. He was about the war. He was about his religion. He was about right from wrong. He was about standing for principles. He was about America because that's the first thing he knew and where he entered the stage as an American hero and a fighter. And then he went back to the South and, couldn't use the same restrooms and water fountains back in the early 60s. And then basically got castigated and jailed because he wasn't willing to go fight for a country that wouldn't let him pee in the same bathroom as you and me.
Right. And, he was first and foremost, an activist who used boxing as a way to make money, but to gain fame. And unlike most fighters, when he, decided to hang up the gloves in '81, he really didn't do anything. I mean, he didn't. It wasn't like he became a color analyst or in any way, shape, or form decided that was going to be his platform. Of course, in '84. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and Ferdy left the camp in '77 right after the Ernie Shavers fight, when he was convinced he had Parkinson's. And so, there was a lot of things going on around Ali in the late '70s, early '80s that was kind of pushed under the rug.
Well, they wanted him to fight forever, and he wanted to fight forever, right? There was no telling him no.
He had to fight for money. I mean, he had some people around him who, in later parts of life, had drained, a significant amounts of cash from him.
Well, that was Don King's calling card for many years, right?
Well, it wasn't just Don. I mean, his manager, Herbert Mohammed, and others were funneling money for, a number of different causes they, felt were important. And so he was the meal ticket. And, Ferdy had enough and left in '77. And, so, the story Ferdy tells us, that he's told me and a number of people, and unfortunately Ferdy is not in good health at this point in time, is, very much that same situation. He saw it early and chose to talk about it. But there was one thing, too. I did work with Cosell, and one of the things I wrote over the weekend, right after hearing a passing, was, how would there have been a Cosell without an Ali? And it went back in large part to really Howard Cosell's star was his ability to play off of Muhammad Ali and Ali off of Cosell. And I really came to the conclusion that no, he probably wouldn't have been as famous. He would have been Cosell, but he wouldn't have been as famous had it not been for Ali, because his arc, Cosell's arc as a broadcaster, in large part was tied to his support and his outspoken following of Ali.
It's interesting. You would say Ali was an activist at heart. That's an interesting word. I've talked to a bunch of people. Behind all of it, some would say, well, he was a boxer who became an activist. He may have been an activist who became a boxer, right? I mean, I don't know where the intellect came from for him, and where all of his reading came from in the 50s and the 60s and the early 60s, as far as how he was treated. But he really is different than all the other athletes. When you think of the boxers, you think of guys who didn't have an education, who didn't read and write, and who had to make a living with their fists. Ali, besides the good looks and the movie star, my face is so pretty, and his ability to talk, it wasn't just the talking. I mean, any professional wrestler can get on and run their mouth. I mean, Roddy Piper ran his mouth, right? But it was what he said, and it was at a time where no one was saying it. Not black, not white, not athlete, not broadcaster, not politician. He was saying things that a lot of people didn't want to hear at that time.
No, and at the same time, he made smack talk basically cool. Number one, and he rapped before people even rapped. So
Yeah, I guess rap started with rhyme, right?
right,
And
it was rhythm,
sure.
and it was all that stuff. So, I mean, he was pop culture. He was a fighter. He was an activist. He was a very complex man at a time when there were a lot of very complex people.
And I guess being at the top, everyone wanted to peel back the onion, right? Everyone wanted to get some access, ask the champ some questions, hear his thoughts, and Cosell was the one that. And I'll say this about Cosell, and look, I've been urinating on Masson here all week because I'm just. I mean, it's June and I'm worn out, Jim. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I sit here and I watch a broadcast every night that's made for the owner and the owner's boys. It's not made for the audience. It's made for the boss. And with Ali and Cosell, Cosell, part of the charm there was Cosell almost, it looked like, didn't like Ali. It was that foil thing, and if you didn't catch on to it, Cosell had to ask tough questions. It was demanded upon him to not softball this black man who was a draft dodger, who was aligned with Islam and things that people didn't understand, and fought against Vietnam while Lyndon Johnson was sending our boys and girls over there. You know, all of that was going on at the time forced Cosell in the same way where if I ever sat with Peter Angelos, I better damn well ask him tough questions. You know, I mean, it better not be about softballing him. And that's part of what made Cosell was that Ali wasn't afraid of the tough questions either. And 50 years later, you know, we still have plenty of people that run from the media because they don't want an honest question. I don't think Ali handed the questions to Cosell. It literally was a shoot interview, right?
Absolutely. The other thing is that, you know, while they needed each other, right, they weren't particularly friends. And I think that was part of the thing.
And it wasn't choreographed. They didn't get together and say, like McMahon, and say, I'm going to say this and then you're going to say that.
No.
I mean, part of the charm was the irreverence and, I mean, it was like a Saturday Night Live, a freeform skit, right?
Right.
Improv.
The other part of it, and, you know, Cosell's ego and Ali's ego were relatively the same. Cosell felt, I mean, with good reason, that he was the smartest guy in any room he walked into. And he felt that it was incumbent upon him to not be to be the guy. I mean, his catchphrase, tell it like it is. I mean, he was going to be the guy who asked. I mean, he, on national television, pleaded with Ali not to fight George Foreman because he thought he was going to get killed. He also was on national television, and these are all things you can Google and you can find them on YouTube. Basically, it asked Ali point blank, "Are you broke?" You know, I mean, he knew what was going on in the inner circle. Cosell
but there was a courage involved in those conversations on both parts that really doesn't exist so much anymore in an orchestrated where reality TV is scripted, right?
Yeah, there was no script, there was no, there was nothing off limits for either person, and I think that was something.
It's
Jim
like
McKay,
Reddit.
Jim McKay once told me that when he would throw it on Wide World of Sports to Ali and Cosell, it was like working without a net. You never had a clue what was going to be said or how it was going to end.
Jim Williams joining us here.
Compelling television.
Absolutely. The Wordman DC on Twitter as well as our unofficial official media examiner. You know, for some people, when they bring up Ali, and I know you saw the documentary about Ali and Frazier and Frazier's angst. I know you know Joe Frazier. The story, he was so tied to Ali through those fights, and those fights were so savage and brutal, and I think you go back and watch them now. I mean, it looks like almost something out of a movie because in the real world, circa 2016, those fights would have been stopped, right? Like at some point because of what the outcome was, which was a 32-year battle with Parkinson's disease for Ali. But the Frazier story is not the prettiest story. I mean, we can all look back in retrospect and say, all right, Ali didn't like Vietnam. All right, check. There's a lot of people that didn't like Vietnam. But the race card and the way it was pulled out and the Uncle Tom and you're for the white man and I'm for the black man, and a lot of that was about selling tickets in 1972 and 73.
Oh, sure. I mean, it was, whether he liked it or not, Frazier made Ali a better boxer. And that was because Frazier had the ability to, and the drive to push Ali to places where Ali didn't want to be pushed. And, Ali could have his way with pretty much anybody. Frazier was a straight-up, in-your-face, boxer. More of a fighter, I should say, than a boxer. There wasn't a lot of flair in what Joe did. Joe would just pummel you to death. And he posed a very interesting dilemma for Ali, who did not like fighting that way. He liked to use his speed. He liked to use his jabs in the way that he could dance around to beat you. And it was tough for him to fight that way, and so it made Ali have to alter his style to beat somebody. And the first time he fought him in Madison Square Garden, of course, obviously he knocked him down. Now most people he'd have knocked out, but Ali could take a punch. So yeah, and Frazier never got the due of what a fighter he was, because he was so tied to the Ali situation, and
Ali was much larger than life. I mean, there was never a press conference Frazier was going to win with Ali, right? It just they did two different things. Frazier was a boxer, Ali was an orator, right?
Yeah, and later in life in Houston, talking to Foreman, George was like, that situation in Zaire was just because he was in my head before we ever stepped in the ring.
Jim Williams joining us here. He is the media examiner and the word man DC out on Twitter. Now, I know you cover the political scene today, and there's a certain orange man with a bad haircut who thinks he wants to run the country, and I'm appalled by all of it, quite frankly. But, it really, when you watch a weekend of Ali and you watch Donald Trump over the last 9 months, it's textbook, right? I mean, Ali sort of wrote the textbook that Trump sort of has followed into a political realm. I mean, it's bizarre, but literally, when you consider the clownery of this guy trying to run the country, much of it really stems back to how to hold an Ali press conference, or what would Vince McMahon do. There is a certain braggadocio. I mean, and I guess we talk about Joe Namath and, at the pool and making the guarantee and all of that. All of that really stems back to Ali. That's the original branch of all of reality and color television in the modern era, and all of the self-confidence, if you will, right?
I don't think there's any question about it. The other thing, though, that you might find interesting, and I think it was kind of lost in what has gone on over the weekend, was a couple of months ago, the last public statement that Ali made before passing was his denouncing of Donald Trump and how he called him racist in his remarks about Muslims, Mexicans, and others. And so, ironically, the last public statement that Ali made was about Trump.
I did not know that. So, how recent was that?
I want to say about a month ago.
Really? Okay.
I mean, so yeah, it was the last public statement that he made. It came out through his spokespeople, because he really didn't talk much, obviously, and hadn't talked much in the last year or so. But he did put some things down in paper and did communicate, through his inner circle that was there with him at the end. And so, yeah, there was a statement. You just Google Ali's statement on Trump, and I'm sure you'll get it. But it was his final statement.
I just did, yeah. We as Muslims have to stand up to those who use Islam to advance their cause. Yeah, I mean, just Google it. It's sitting right here. There's no doubt about it. It's all over every website there is. I did not see that. I must say this, and I'll leave you with this, Jim, and give you a forum on this. He died in the middle of the night on Friday night. I woke up Saturday morning. I've told a story about how I met Ali, and I put my picture up, and there's stories for everyone, right, in and around Ali. I would say by the middle of the day Saturday, and I had plans over the weekend to get some stuff done, I started seeing some of the most beautiful, eloquent, visceral writing. And I don't mean 140 characters, although there was a lot of that. But by Sunday, and I have Peter King on this week. I'm having Ross Greenberg on this week. All of these people, everyone wrote something about Ali that was deep. There was such depth to him and such depth to his life that in passing, and look, Prince died, David Bowie, a lot of the people that there would be great writing about, and I went back and I saw all of the old Ali stuff from my pal Alan Goldstein, who wrote a book, and a lot of the authors that are alive were out talking about the old books. But I'm just talking about in the hours. I'm talking about obituaries. I'm talking about tributes and that sort of thing. Posthumously, the stuff written about Ali in the hours after his death was captivating. At every turn, not just sports writing or political writing or racial, lines or civil rights, all of that encompassed Ali. It was just amazing to read the writing as someone who writes and someone who loves to read great writing.
Yeah, and I will urge people, if you can, Google Saltman, Saltman.
I'm doing it right now.
On My Friend Ali. It actually isn't. It's being published this morning, so Google it.
Shelley Saltman, yes?
Yep. And Shelley was in the inner circle of Ali. He was the person who promoted and was partners in the company that owned the closed-circuit television rights.
Wow, I'm looking at it right now. He owned the Ali Frazier fights, right? And closed circuit, that's another thing for a television guy like you. I remember there used to be brawls breaking out all over the country because people couldn't figure out how to make the projector work. And it was really expensive to go to those fights.
Yeah, you go to a theater, or you go to, in my case, Curtis Dixon Hall in Tampa or the Armory in Tampa, and you would watch these fights on large screens. And it would be like going to a movie. And you would sit down and you'd watch, all the preliminary fights and pretty much everything you now see on pay-per-view. Shelley was one of the, innovators of changing things over to pay-per-view cable in the 1970s, early 80s, and promoted. He had Ali, he had Sugar Ray Leonard. He
did Evel Knievel, for crying out loud. Look at that.
Right. Well, actually, another day, another time, I will get you in touch with Shelley. Evel Knievel beat Shelley up because he wrote a book called See No Evil, which basically it had to do with the jumping of the Snake River Canyon. Shelley had the book rights, to that, and he chronicled everything behind the scenes. And it was found out early on that there was no way that they were going to be able to jump the Snake River Canyon, and they knew it, and they never told ABC about it. And so when he didn't jump the Snake River Canyon, it wasn't a surprise. They spent most of their time trying to figure out how to try it without killing him. And so once the book came out, Shelley was then the president of Fox Sports. And they went to his office in Southern California, came in and beat him with a baseball bat, almost killed him.
Wow!
And there's a movie coming out called See No Evil, and it'll chronicle the whole thing, and it's about all the things that happened at that time. And Shelley is one of when you were talking about over the weekend. Shelley was one of the first people I called, because of his long and storied relationship with Ali.
Well, that would be neat. I'd love to have him on later on in the week. Jim, always love having you on and the insights. We'll be following you out at Wordman DC, man. Stanley Cup, NHL this week, right? Then we're going to have a little period of grace here. Wimbledon and just a little quiet time as it gets warm this summer. But I know you'll be in front of the TV and certainly monitoring all the political machinations as well here in the United States of America.
Yeah, our next big fight, yes. Absolutely.
Right, and that'll be a 6-month brawl. That'll be a 15-rounder. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Always great to have you on, Jimmy. Take care of yourself this week.
Be well.
Thanks for the memories. There he goes, Jim Williams, Wordman DC, the unofficial media examiner here at WNST. You can find me out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. I'm also streaming out on our YouTube channel at WNSTV. You can check that out as well. And of course, anything you miss, you find in our morning newspaper, 7 a.m. It hits your email inbox. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And any breaking news that would happen this week happens first on your mobile device. It's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. I'll be signing copies of Purple Rain 1 and 2 at Black Eyed Susan in Glendon on Saturday from 11:30 to 2. Hope to see you up there. I'm watching the Copa all week. Very, very busy. Lots of things going on around here. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. 2. Welcome back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Monitoring all things Orioles all week long. And, of course, the Ravens back out on the practice field after their little slap and costly slap on the wrist last week. I'm bringing in a guy right now that's one of my favorite people. He's known for covering football, but I read all of his work. And over the weekend, I saw such incredible